All right, guys, welcome back to another edition, our Aftermath podcast for the Orange Crush. Today it's Clemson and Stanford. It's been a weird weekend for everybody. We just want to extend our thoughts to everybody that's been affected by Hurricane Helene. Hopefully, this podcast can provide a nice escape between David and I's shenanigans. David, Clemson takes down Stanford to make it three in a row, and now they face a road test, or road trip rather, for the next couple weeks. Wrapped up the homestand about like you think, or what were sort of your initial thoughts following Saturday night's win?
Well, a lot better than I thought with that homestand because you come off the loss to Georgia and you go, man, App State, they've been a giant killer in the past. It seems like NC State, they've beaten Clemson 2 out of 3 years, even though that was in Raleigh. They always play Clemson tough, and then you're like, okay, Stanford, who knows what to expect? Home of John Elway, Christian McCaffrey, they're going to come calling. So you came out of that Georgia game going, "Oh, okay, what are we going to do here?" And man, this team has rebounded, responded. And now that I've kind of had time to think about it, here's my big takeaway is that this is a team that had been playing really well, right? We watched them. We were sitting there in the press box, and they were faced with adversity Saturday night and a team that wanted to come in and beat them. And this is a game where in the past couple of years they lose. They lose that game. They just didn't have the offensive chutzpah to come out and beat somebody to kind of overcome it. And instead they win by 26 and probably should have been more. And you go, maybe this team's got a little something because it was only 26 because of a garbage time touchdown. And I get it. Stanford threw two interceptions that were just brutal. Third one really ended the game for them. But still, Clemson won by 26. You look at the final score, it should have been more.
And I think what Dabo was hinting at throughout the week when he kept referring to Stanford's feistiness on film, he was like, this is a team that's got a lot of bite to it. And I wonder at the back of his mind, because he mentioned it on Saturday night about, man, I love that we got punched in the mouth a little bit. We had a chance to respond. Because when you look at App State and NC State, they wiped out any source of hope from those two squads almost immediately. It was 28 to nothing before you could blink. And Clemson didn't really have to do much other than play the other backups, play the reserves, and they were doing interviews on the bench during the third quarter, I think, especially during that NC State game. So it was a very relaxed state of mind for this program for that last 3 weeks in between the bye week and those two blowouts. So you get Stanford that comes in, they test your, I think, maturity, they test your gap integrity, something that I'm sure we'll get into in a bit here. But I look at that turnover margin, and I completely agree with you there, thinking this was last year. I don't know if Clemson's winning at halftime. It's a team that usually found a way to pants itself, and often they did last year. And this clearly, I think, shows that this is a different rendition, regardless of the Georgia result. This is a team that's growing, and it's going to face another test here soon on Saturday.
It is a team that's growing. And, a couple of instances, and one that I brought up with Dabo Sweeney after the NC State game, where Cade Klubnik in that NC State game had a couple of seam routes. Maybe one was a go route down the sideline, but one was a seam route. Maybe open for a split second, then that closed. His feet stayed still, and he checked down to film off it for 7 yards. That shows his growth. That check down, that's okay. If you watch, that's the check down league, right? That's what they do. He did, and it showed some growth. And then Saturday, immediately, boom, this offensive line used a little bit sometimes against Stanford. And Cade gets flush from the pocket there early, and he rolls out, and instead of trying to make a play down the field, just takes off with it and makes one guy kind of miss there about the 40, and then it's free running. That's where he has played so much better, so much smarter. Had one mistake, threw the one interception, but this team's growing. And and the fun thing for me, I you look at it and you go, man, Tristan Lee's probably going to be back. Ryan Lithicum's going to be back. Marcus Tate probably going to be back. Miller's going to be back. Cade's going to be back. Going to have new running backs, but all the wide receivers can come back. Going to have a new tight end. But guess what? Olsen Pat Henry's on a touchdown pass. It's going to be the same team next year.
Yeah, there's a lot of signs of returners, and regardless of I think what happens this year, there's not enough to merit an NFL chase for some. And so there's going to be, especially if this team makes the postseason, there's going to be a formula for this new group. And it's going to be a new era from compared to the 15 to 2020, where they're making the playoffs consistently. They just out talented everybody, especially in that Trevor Lawrence stretch where you didn't even have to really turn the game on to know what the result was. And I'm sitting there and I'm getting text flooded. I mean, it's in group chats and they're going, well, and it's something that caught my eye and something that I wrote about on TigerNet was this team started to really earn the benefit of the doubt with inferior competition where you were kind of holding your breath for the last 3 years of, I mean, on paper, when you look from roster to roster, this team's absolutely more talented than the other team, but what are they going to do to screw it up? Or what careless error is going to get in their way? It was never a team that I think very few times it was they just got beat. It was, well, they did this, they did that, they did that. The Duke game especially stands out. Now when we go to this road trip with Florida State, they're reeling. They're really bad football team when you look at it. And Wake Forest losing to the Ragin' Cajuns of Louisiana Monroe. And you think to yourself, feels like another test within itself. I know that we just talked about earning the benefit of the doubt, but I think these last 3 weeks have shown us that this is a more talented team that's not willing to get out of its own way. And they might be competing for something down the road. They're showing characteristics to me of teams of the past, and I think that's worth discussion.
Well, we can quickly put Stanford to bed and talk about that test because what they didn't do well, I thought they made great adjustments on something we've written about. The offense taking those deep shots there early, not hitting. They hit one, but not hitting them. Perhaps stunted some drives. Came out in the second half, took the underneath, took the drag route, took the crossing route, checked it down, dumped it off. Great adjustment. Defensively, I don't think that they were quite prepared for Stanford to come out and basically run the triple option, and that's kind of what it was. And you look, and Ashton Daniels, the Stanford quarterback, it didn't take me long to pick up on it. I'm going, man, they're just basically running, or they're running an options what they're doing with Ashton Daniels. At one point they had 71 yards passing, I think, and it was obvious they knew they weren't going to beat Clemson passing the football, putting their quarterback in jeopardy. So they come out, they're kind of running that little, maybe almost midline option. And Clemson's defensive ends were not picking it up. Defensive tackles not picking it up. You see Cade Denhoff, AJ Hoffler. Just, oh my gosh, he's rolling out. It's a pass. And boom, they jet up field and they lose contain. He just runs. And it was never going to be a pass. It was always going to be, a running play. And in the second half, they made the adjustments defensively and said, okay, now we see that this is an option attack. And at one point there late, I think midway through the fourth quarter, I looked, Stanford had racked up 55 total yards. 55 once the adjustment was made. So that shows you, man, this defense is pretty good. They're playing well. And so now that brings us to this week. If I'm Florida State, we have a great poster on our board named Brett FSU. Brett FSU is a legend on TigerNet. TigerNet. He is a Florida State fan who always comes in post. He's a gentleman. He's always kind and nice about it. And he put it great yesterday in a post. He said, man, if I'm Mike Norvell, and let's face it, Mike Norvell doesn't always do the smart thing offensively. You put up Toafili or whoever's going to be there in the backfield with Brent Blunt at quarterback, and you're just going to run on the perimeter all day long. You're going to run inside, you're going to run outside, but mostly on the perimeter, and see if you can beat Clemson that way. Because throwing down the field with Brock Glenn and those wide receivers probably not in his best interest. So yes, a test for Clemson. Probably going to see some things offensively this week they haven't seen on film. Quickly do you adjust? Quickly do you shut it down? And how quickly do you take that crowd out of it?
Right, because I think that was the biggest gripe we had, at least at halftime, was that gap integrity. Because rewatching the game, you just see guys just running into tackles and running into linemen. It was just go for it. And then in the second half, you see a more calm, reserved team. And so I wrote down, is that a weakness or is that just something they didn't really expect or see coming? Because once they threw the ball, Ashton Daniels was just throwing it to orange players the entire time, whether it was Terrell or the lob to Lucas. And then Clemson just simply capitalizing. Once they got him into third and long situations where it was a clear passing down, there was no shot for Stanford. So the option was the only way to go. And I think it's worth noting watching Brock Glenn last year, watching him in the Georgia game. Oh man, watching him in the Louisville game. Not as inspiring. There's a reason Florida State went to the portal and got DJ Uyunglele. We know we're not going to see him on Saturday, and it's going to wipe out a multitude of reporters' questions today when we go talk to Dabo about the whole storyline. But I see this as a game where, on paper, and I think in the back of their minds, this is a Florida State team that, again, is reeling. And on paper, it's going to be probably a 14 to 20 point underdog line on whatever betting site you use. This is a real opportunity for Clemson to go on the road in a probably environment where Florida State fans are thinking in the back of their minds, we got nothing to lose this year. Let's just go all out for Clemson because at the very least, we can ruin a rival's season. I view this as their biggest test yet, despite it being 1-4. Is that maybe something you push back on, or do you see this as another moment for Clemson to show what kind of team they really are?
Well, Florida State's going to play. I expect them to play their best game of the season. I really do. They have not been good, and what they have coming up with Miami and North Carolina, Notre Dame, like they've got some games going to be tough. They really aren't going to be favored in any of those. Um, the way this team is right now, bowl eligibility out the window. I mean, they're not good because you think about it, like they've basically got to go out and win five more games. And, the seven that they have left with that schedule, brutal. It's just brutal, and I don't think they can do that. So, uh, team's going to put forth their best effort for Clemson. I go back to this. This is a great analogy. Going back to a Clemson at Florida State game, maybe back in 2012, 14, somewhere in there. Actually, I think it was 14. Deshaun Watson. Remember, he replaces Cole Stout in that Florida State game. Some Clemson fans sent me a message as I'm down on the sidelines, and it was, "Hey, David, the guys look fired up. Do they look ready to go? Are they fired up?" And I started laughing, and one of the defensive tackles was walking by me, and he goes, "What are you laughing at?" And I said, "A Clemson fan wants to know if you guys are fired up." And he goes, "You know what? That's great." He said, "You can be fired up coming out of the locker room. You can be fired up in pregame. And then it all goes away the first time that dude across from you pops you in the mouth." He goes, "Then it's just football. Then it is just football." And he swatted me on the leg, and I said, "Man, that's great. And it's fantastic. You can be fired up. Florida State's got to be fired up. Then you just got to go punch them in the mouth, right? For Clemson, it's got to be business. Wear your business suits, that all white, the orange helmet, go down there, take care of business." That's what you do.
And they've done that so far in those first three home games is emphasize those quick starts, whether it's the plays with Klubnik's legs or it's taking deep shots to Wesco against App State. And that also comes on the defensive side where you get an early pick, you get a early fourth down stop against Stanford. This team has found very complementary ways of getting ahead and getting comfortable and in a rhythm. So I think when you look at this Florida State game, if there's any semblance of a coin toss victory, I'm taking the ball first, and I'm giving Klubnik in this offense an opportunity to really go after it. And I think for a Florida State team, they're 1-4. They've been all over the place as a unit. I think for them to eventually find that spot where it's okay, we got our energy, we're hyped up, we're ready to go, and then boom, Clemson 7-0. Boom, Clemson 10-0. It takes the wind out of your sails, and it could early if they play this the right way.
Tell you, this it's always a great road trip for us. A little bit of a different stadium this time around. They're doing a lot of renovations. They've limited scope and in the press box. But this is always fun for me. I love going down there. I tell people I'm a big college football fan. I love all of college football. I like to watch Ohio State dot the I. I like to watch Jump and Matt Quarter. I love to see what Iowa does with the Children's Hospital nearby when they, wave to the patients. I wait with SoCal. I even like going down to kind of when they start winning all in storms. Football environment, it's great. Um, be a different test. This is a Florida State team that is absolutely reeling. It reminds me of the year we Trevor and Clemson was up 56 nothing just almost before you could blink, or
The
56 to
book
10 or
game.
whatever. And I kind of go back to
It's the book
that.
game.
Yeah, the book game. And I think that's kind of what you need to do this week. And people around here tell you what, and down in Florida, we have suffered so much. Still no power at my house. You've just got power back on. I'm in a friend's house. Thankful to them that they gave me a spot to kind of land here. A lot of people up here still without power. I've got old people road still without power. I'm looking forward to just kind of getting away and kind of having that uh, distraction, I guess. I got a message from a fireman this morning who works up in the central, he works for Pickens Fire Department. He told me that he went down to the lower part of the state with his group because they expected some devastation down there. When he got home, the girlfriend, the child, not there. They had to move out. His house with no power, all of his food in his fridge ruined. He had gone down to try and help somebody else. In fact, he had to use chainsaws just to get back to his house. Got back there, and he said, I've been on my feet for 72 hours, hadn't really slept. Thankful that Clemson played a game Saturday to Stanford and provided a distraction. He kind of sat in his truck, I think, and watched it on his phone. So we all need this extra distraction. We're going to get it Saturday against Florida State. It's not going to be the DJU game that everybody was thinking about. But think about this, man. You got to us of the ACC kickoff, and three teams everybody talked about: Clemson, Miami, Florida State. Right? Who was picked to win the league? Florida State. And everybody just, man, I'm telling you what, I know so many Clemson fans were like, oh, Dabo, don't use the portal, and Florida State's going to win by 50. You heard that too. To quote The Office, oh my, how the turns have tabled, or whatever it is that Michael Scott used to say. Um, going to be a fascinating weekend. Going to be a fascinating week. And I'm hoping, cross our fingers, I've been talking to EJ Manuel. Hopefully, we can get him on the podcast later this week to talk a little bit of Florida State.
It's going to be a fun one. And I think even though this was the one that was certainly circled on the calendar as potentially a top 15 matchup heading into determining the fate of the ACC in early October, and how crazy and to quote Michael Scott, how the turntables, it is a,
Yeah.
it is a crazy, this just makes college football great. I mean, you and I are really looking at Alabama, Georgia as that Clemson Stanford game is going on and just seeing the wild back and forth of everything. Anything
The
can happen
talent.
on Saturday night. And even if you got a 17-year-old kid at receiver who can't even vote right now, crazy things can happen. So, David, do we have any final thoughts before we wrap up? We got a presser to get here too at about 11 o'clock and a podcast to post.
Talking about that 17-year-old receiver for
God,
Alabama. You know what the best part of that was for me is that the stadium goes dark, but he immediately starts, doing an old Atlanta Falcons dance from way back in the day, the Dirty Bird. He's 17. How does he know about the Dirty? I love it.
he's
Anyway,
got to be a
that's just
Dion
college
fan.
football.
Got to be a Coach
Got to be,
Prime fan.
and those two teams are very talented. We know that. We've seen one of them up close. Alabama's talented. Uh, wow, what a game that was. And
Yeah,
for Clemson, man, you've got to start building. Let's talk really fast about the schedule coming up before we
sure.
go. It's a weird October in Clemson because I'm used to October. You play two, maybe three home games. One in the month of October, Virginia on October 19th. Only play three games in the month of October. You go on the road the first 2 weeks, and by the 19th, you're done for the whole month of October. The one home game. Clemson plays 41.2% of its games in the regular season in November. And what a November that's going to be. Eli Holstein, a trip to Pitt. You got Louisville coming to town. You got South Carolina. You got the Citadel. I mean, it's going to be a fun November. Got a trip to Virginia Tech in there. Are you kidding me? How did they play at Miami the other day? Brent Price crew looking good. So we kind of enter October with a little bit of a bang. Florida State, then at Wake Forest, you mentioned them losing their last second field pointed off the uprights. Tony Elliott in Virginia, not sure that they're much of a challenge for Clemson. And then we have that hot November. I'm excited to get down to Tallahassee and just write the next chapter of this Clemson football season.
Right. And I think when we enter November, I think you and I probably both expect this team to be 7-1, barring some unforeseen disaster in the next couple weeks. But compared to last year versus where it's simply playing for pride, Clemson's going to be playing for a playoff spot. And I think that's all you can ask for entering the final stages of the college season. David, it should be a lot of fun, and we're going to have plenty of coverage and content here at TigerNet.com. Want to thank you. Want to thank Herb Tyler and Chick-fil-A at Clemson Seneca, along with Lisa Nason and Nason Accounting in Greenville. Guys, once again, we really want to just extend our thoughts, our prayers to if you've been affected by Hurricane Helene. Hopefully, this Orange Crush podcast, our little mini breakdown and our Florida State preview, which I hope we can get EJ on. That'd be really cool to get a Florida State alum and really great partner of the ACC network to preview that matchup. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Be on the lookout for content. This podcast is going to go up as soon as I can click it on the computer. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care and have a great day.